This conference will now be recorded.
Because we have to change it every day.
I did the same thing last meeting. So I don't think that lands it so far. Okay.
Are we on? Are we ready?
No, it's not.
Help me get on.
Change my password.
Yeah,
Talking
go
about-
to, oh, yeah, there we go.
Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the CRA workshop this evening. Ricardo, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Steven Spina,
Here?
Jody Wilkinson,
Here.
Lance Smith,
Here.
Kenneth Burgess,
Here.
Charles Proctor,
Here.
Mayor Munson, William Poe, Matthew Maggard, Norman Sherman, Lily Moeller, Nicole Hamilton, Dave Walters, Gary Hattrick, Kimberly Miller, Tracy Mahone. That's the roll call.
Okay, please note that the city manager has arrived. All right, thank you. Ms. Hamilton, we'll start with you with the first business item of Parks Master Plan update.
All right. So we are back with our second phase. As you will remember, this is a three-phase park plan. The second phase tonight we'll be talking about the present and future of our parks. Tonight we have our consultants with GAI, Kristen Claiborne. Is that how you say it? Claiborne. I was close. And she will take us through the workshop. Please, if you have any questions, input, this is what we're here for. We want to hear back from you. What do you think? If we need to make any adjustments, speak up. And after the master plan, the parks master plan, we'll take a break and then we'll go into the CRA master plan.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So I'm going to call up Kristen.
Thanks, Gail. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. I was just going to ask if I had a clicker. Thank you. My name's Kristen Caborn. Thank you so much for having me back tonight to talk about the next steps in your Zephyrhills Parks and Recreation Master Plan. With me tonight is Andrea Pinuela. She has been working on the plan with me and she's going to be taking notes. So any input that y'all have, please let me know. Also from GAI is Tom Kohler sitting in the audience. Tom's going to be here for the CRA, but is also really excited to participate in the parks part tonight too. So with that, again, I'm going to give you kind of an overview of where we have been so far and just real quick to catch up because it's been a few months and then jump right into what's going to create the framework for the vision of the future of the parks. So the reason why we do a master plan is to understand the needs and opportunities for parks and recreation as a whole in Zephyrhills. We want this to be responsive to the needs of your current residents, but then knowing that this is a residential community, what Zephyrhills is going to look like in the future and how we can keep up with that growth. With that, creating a blueprint for the future. And then improving, sustaining, and enhancing the already wonderful parks and recreation assets you have here in Zephyrhills and creating a plan for those to move into the future as well. So we started off with a project initiation. This is a 3 phases that Gail was talking about, where we started off the conversation with staff and understanding the frame of reference for today. Then we went into the existing conditions analysis, and many of you all participated in that, and we thank you very much. This was where we did our public input. We had a statistically valid survey, an online survey, as well as face-to-face public meetings where we got to talk to people live and in person. We also, as part of that, do our own inventory and evaluation of each of your parks. You've seen that. I walked you through the inventory at our last meeting, where we really get to understand the conditions of the park and how they're functioning for the residents. And now what we're into is the final step. It's where we're going to take that initial public input and what we saw and move into the phase 2, which are the next steps, creating the vision. So this, the presentation tonight is going to be grouped into 3 categories. The future one, we're going to talk, or the first one, excuse me, we're going to talk about the future expansion of parks and recreation in Zephyrhills. This is not only to be just for the city, but looking at potential partnerships with Pasco County to address more regional park needs. And then the idea of the start to your own parks and recreation department. The second section that we're going to talk about is the overall visioning, and this is developing guiding principles. Guiding principles are really important. They are taking all of the pieces of information that we gathered in the existing conditions report and putting them together in themes, if you will, so we can make recommendations that are grouped together in very digestible, very easy pieces of information. And that also is going to include goals and objectives, and eventually it'll include the cost for all this fund. So that'll be the last phase with your capital improvement plan and recommendations. So we're not going to talk about that last one tonight. That's going to be the very last thing that we do as we wrap up the plan. We'll be working with staff quite a bit as we build the capital improvement plan and the recommendations for parks and recreation. And one thing that I want to mention that we talked about staff with earlier is that because we've been working for a little while and have already done some robust public input, we will have some recommendations for parks for this current fiscal year, for any available funds that the city might have for current fiscal year. And then as you begin your fiscal year 25-26 planning, which is going to be very, very soon, we'll have a year of recommendations from October 1, 2025. So those recommendations before the plan gets finalized and presented to you will be included with staff. I'll be working on staff with those, with the idea that we want the city to spend money on things that are going to be meaningful now, but then won't have to be put in place just to be renovated or obsolete in the future as the plan moves into future phases. All right, so talking about future expansion, this is level service. This is where sometimes we get a little bit technical, so feel free to ask me any questions. I'm going to show some maps. Y'all would have had them in your packet. Level service, of course, is required by your comprehensive plan. It's outlined in your recreation open space element of your comprehensive plan. Right now, your level service is at 4 acres per 1,000. That's a pretty standard level of service. It's not out of line. The way that your level of service calculates acreage base is you're not going to have a deficiency in Zephyrhills until 2050, based on the population projections going all the way up to almost 30,000 people. So that's the wonderful news right now. What this type of level of service does not address is what we have been working on in the master plan, and it's the more modern way, is to have an additional level of service that talks about functional level of service. Because when you're talking about 4 acres per 1,000, you're not stipulating the quality of those acres. And so a retention pond with a fountain and a walking path around it is not providing the same functional level of service as a 2-acre park that has a playground, a walking trail, open space, picnic pavilions, and a sport court. So we took the public input that we heard through the process and have put together what would become your functional level of service, and I'll be talking about that in a little bit. Other important changes are, right now the Sarah Vandenberg Tennis and Wellness Center has no public access, but it is counted in your level of service. So we're recommending removing that because it is certainly a value to the community. It's got its great business plan, but it is not open access to the public. When we talk about parks level service, it's open air, anybody can go at any time without any fees or charges. So we're recommending removing SVB, but adding in the Z venue. So part of what we're going to be making recommendations right now, you have a lot of land at Z venue, and that has the opportunity to serve a neighborhood park level of service with just some minor improvements. So actually, if you make those adjustments, it adjusts the acreage to even a larger 5.7 acre increase. So there's no detriment to that, but it's really helping to get to a public purpose when you're talking about levels of service in Parks and Recreation.
Can I ask you a question?
You sure may, of course.
Concerning the tennis center, there are hours that the public can attend and play tennis free, and there are memberships available, similar to the Y. So is that not considered access or?
So it's still a private facility, even though it's on public land. And we'll get to this very next slide where we're talking about your park standards with functional level service. It's not contributing a functional public purpose for the general public. There's a lot of value in it. There's a lot of value in the Y. The Y actually, and the reason why we're not taking out the Y is the Y, even with the townhome development around it, the Y still has open public land access around it where you can go to the playground and do things like that without having to, it's not restricted. The tennis center is a little bit restricted. Actually, it's quite a bit restricted. So that's really the difference there.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
What about the Zephyrhills Golf Course? Even though that
Zephyrhills
one-
Golf Course is not counted either because that is a very specific purpose.
Okay.
Golf only. So it certainly has a role, but when you're talking about a wide breadth of public access, that's a pay-to-play facility. We typically don't count that. And I'm going to talk about HOA parks as well, because that's another question that comes up a lot. Y'all have a lot of homeowners association parks in the cities that, again, are serving a purpose for the restricted access that they provide, but not a citywide purpose. Any other questions on that before I go to the next slide?
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing on getting to a functional level of service are having a park standard for a park in Zephyrhills. So we build this based on what we hear from the public and what we know are the trends in parks and recreation in this part of the state. So we're not suggesting that every park should be rectangular shaped and look exactly like this. But what we heard from the public input are this list of elements are the minimum amount of things that residents of Zephyrhills should expect to see in a neighborhood park or a close to home park. These are not meant to be so prescriptive that it, again, has to look like a rectangle and has to be laid out exactly like this. The idea is that you have minimum goal of 2 acres. Now, when we talk about the historic grid of Zephyrhills getting 2 acres, and you'll see in a little bit, there is a little bit of what we call park desert. I know that sounds kind of funny, but that is what we call them, an area where you're not providing any parks. 2 acres may be a challenge. So this is an aspirational goal when you can get 2 acres. And in that 2 acres, you look for a standard Zephyrhills Park sign. Walking loops. Walking loops are really important and something that came up very high on your public input. People want a safe place to walk. So a lot of times they'll walk to a park, but then they'll get the vast majority of their exercise walking on a perimeter trail in a park. That also allows the ability, if you've got a multi-generational family, for people to be at the same park and the person walking can see what's going on in the rest of the park. So walking trails, open space, I cannot emphasize enough when we talk about a 1/4 acre of open, unprogrammed space. The tendency is, especially in smaller parks, to try and pack a whole lot into it. And that actually, the open spaces where you're going to find a lot of people, they may be tossing a softball, they may be laying out in the sun, having a picnic, kicking a ball. Open space is really important. You can see we've got open space and walking trails showing with trees, a tree canopy, lots of shade, a play area. In this graphic, we're showing it as a playground, but we would encourage it to be up to the neighborhood. If you all are bringing new parks online, talk to the neighborhood surrounding the park and what they would like to see there. It might not be a playground. The play area may be an exercise area. It may be, and maybe we've seen ninja courses, exercise like more extreme sports things where people are swinging and jumping and things like that. So don't be only thinking of playgrounds. Same with sports court or sports field. We're showing a basketball court here just to show something, but the neighborhood might want a pickleball court, or they may want a backstop for soft pitch softball, whatever it is. It's very neighborhood specific. And then along with that, just good design criteria in parks, picnic tables, picnic pavilions, lit. Your parks are open till 10 o'clock. We encourage you to keep that up. That's the best time of year in the November to March time in Florida to be outside, and it's pitch black at 5:30. So having people will be able to shoot hoops or play on the playground after school or work is really important. Having safe access, pedestrian access to parks, including crosswalks from surrounding residential areas, and then bike rack and designated ADA parking. So very little off-street parking, if any, only to accommodate your ADA required spaces. One thing that you do not see in this, and that is on purpose, is a restroom. We, unless there's a big public demand, we don't recommend restrooms in close to home or neighborhood parks. The reason being is restrooms are the single highest maintenance thing. They're also the single highest problem areas in a neighborhood park. And we understand that it could be inconvenient for a parent who might have 2 kids and Johnny has to go to the bathroom and Susie doesn't, and they have to walk home just because Johnny has to go to the bathroom. But in the long run, it really helps the functionality of your neighborhood parks from a maintenance perspective. Good. All right, so now I'm going to show a couple of maps, and this gives you a really good picture of how your parks are beginning to show you how your parks are functionally serving your residents. So this map is showing the blue areas are a 10-minute walk from each of your existing city parks. The exception to that is Samuel Pasco down in the bottom. Let's see, is my laser work? Yes, so Samuel Pasco has a blue hatch service area around it because it's a county park. It still is serving because the city limits are black and the city boundaries, of course, everything in the city is shown in white. So Samuel Pasco is doing a really nice job of serving some City of Zephyrhills residents, even though it's a county park. We don't want to discount that because it is providing service. Something else to know about this map is when we use GIS, we use actual entrances and exits. So when you're looking at it, you're anywhere there's one of these yellow circles, it's showing an actual entrance or exit. So when you're looking at Zephyr Park, there's a ton of entrances and exits. Really, you can walk in from anywhere. So Zephyr Park service area, 10-minute walk is going to go much, much further. Whereas at Samuel Pasco, if you added an entrance on the west side, for instance, this service area would expand out to cover much more of this residential area. So that's how this is the first look at what areas in the city do not have a park within a 10-minute walk. It's a planning tool. It helps build the case for where you all might need to look at some park acquisition. So then layering on top of that, the next step that we take are all of the yellow areas, dark yellow areas and light yellow areas are areas that are either current residential use or have a future land use of residential. So these are areas that either have homes in them now or are zoned appropriately to have homes in the future. And this is where the yellow makes it very obvious where you are lacking some city parks to your existing residential population and your future probably soon to be residential population. So you end up with 4 areas. Now, we're not saying that you need to go out and do this tomorrow. These are areas that when we're working with staff, we want staff to have in mind that should parcels become available near these areas, it will help increase your functional level of service. Acreage are good, again, but looking at how people who live in residentials are easily accessing parks is important. The layer that digs deeper to this, we're going to talk about are your homeowners association parks. So I'm going to run through these really quickly. Keep in mind as I'm talking about these, normally when we do parks and recreation master plans, we pretty much discount HOA parks completely because they are restricted access. They have facilities that are under lock and key. You can only go there if you live there. And the reality is, in Zephyrhills, a lot of your HOA parks are serving the residents, especially when you start to talk about the west side. But when you think about what park standards and what your public would like to see for your parks, your playgrounds, your open space, your walking areas, a sport court, and tree canopy, picnic areas, that type of stuff. When you look at your HOA parks, a lot of them have pools and shuffleboard, probably very appropriate for their neighborhoods. These developers know what they're doing, but you're not seeing a lot of what the general public residential area of Zephyrhills has stated is important to them. So shuffleboards, clubhouses, pool, again, very valuable amenities to have. This one has a playground, but again, you have to live in Silverado to be able to access the playground. Same here. So you're beginning to see the theme. However, what that does is, because we know that you have a lot of HOA parks specifically on the west side of the city, when we start to look at areas that are not served by city parks, that would be an area that would be lower priority. So as we build the recommendations for the plan, we're going to suggest to the city that you focus on the grid and you focus on the northern part of the city to, if you're looking at expanding your actual park geographic distribution footprint across the city. The Samuel Pasco, if it gets some additional land on the south, that land that's in unincorporated Pasco County, but that will expand the access there. More entrances there will also help expand access. And then the really good news that we like and that we want to report is, almost with the very exception as the far west part of the city, almost everybody can drive to a park in 10 minutes. So we looked at your 10-minute drive for Hercules, Cruisin', Veterans Memorial, Z Venue, and Zephyr Park. And those are your bigger parks. Those are the parks that people might be inclined to get in their car and drive to after work and after school. So you've got really nice coverage using those 5 parks with a 10-minute drive. And that does consider traffic. It's about a 3-mile service area as a 10-minute drive. So then the next layer that we add is condition. So you all remember at my last presentation, I went through each park and talked about the condition of each park. When we visit the park, we rate everything, just to refresh your memory, from a 1, 2, 3. Very simple scale. A 3 means that your park is exceeding its intended purpose. A 3 is typically a very new park. It has a wow factor. A 2 means that the park is meeting its intended purpose. It's clean, it's well maintained, it's modernized, it's got shade, it's safe. The vast majority of parks are a 2. And then a 1 means that it's reaching the end of its useful life. It might have some functionality problems. The amenities have been well loved over the years, that it's probably time to consider replacing them. So each individual amenity has been ranked. So these numbers are an average of all of the equipment that is in each of these. So what this does is this paints even a further picture, as we're going to build our recommendations, of your capital improvement plan. The very first thing you can see, the oranger, the closer to red the service area is, means it's the lower of a park score. So when we talk about Shepherd Park, that is the one park in the city that needs the most love. So you're good that you see the service area here for that park. Everybody who lives around there who could walk to that park within 10 minutes has a lower level of service than the areas that are more yellow and green in the city. Important note on this service area is if a higher service area layers above a lower service area. So for example, when you're talking about Zephyr Park and Shepherd's Park, so Zephyr Park has a better quality rating. So the green for Zephyr Park is going to cover up where the 2 service areas overlap. The green for Zephyr Park is going to cover up the lower service area. Does that make sense? So the amount of orange is actually smaller there because these people who live right in between the 2 parks have access to a higher quality park at Zephyr Park. But this helps us build our capital improvement plan. Obviously, Hercules is brand new. Hercules service area is a 3. So we know that the people who live within walking distance of Hercules Park have access to one of your wow factor parks. Makes sense, right? And this helps us when we start to get over further east in the city. Cruisin' Park is one that could use a little bit of love over the years. So this helps us make recommendations for your existing parks and how to prioritize your money over the years. Okay, so that is expansion. Yes.
On this chart, you show, for example, a park score and an asset score. So is the asset score the equipment type areas that so you might have a little bit higher park score, but you still need to replace some of the equipment. Is that what?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great question. I didn't know how much detail I should get into, but since you asked.
All right.
The user experience score is what we call design and ambiance. It's much more qualitative in our assessment. How does the park feel? How is it functioning from a landscape architecture designer type perspective? So that is where we go in, and we are actually have a notepad and are taking notes, and we've got a whole design and ambiance criteria that we make notes about. The asset score is just the strict 1, 2, 3 of how we rate each individual piece of equipment. So you all have a GIS database that feeds into a dashboard, and city staff can pull up a park, they can click on an asset, they can see the photograph we took of it, how we rated it, and any notes that we have about it. So those two together give us the overall park score.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Great question.
If I could ask one other question, please, Mr. Commissioner, or Mr. Chair, I guess it is. So like Lincoln Heights Park, for example. So recently that underwent a facelift, got some new equipment, looks great now. That raised the whole park score too, right? The experience score and everything. And you see that's kind of light green. So it's still a 1.8 user experience though. And I wonder why, because it really did respond to what was wanted in the community. And
so that's a great question too. And we probably inventoried it before the facelift. So it's a snapshot in time. We would have that information now as we move into recommendations. So we would just work with staff. It's probably not a 1.8 now. We inventoried last year, earlier in the year. So if it has been updated since then that would adjust the recommendations for Lincoln Heights.
March of 20.
Mr. Chair, can I ask, when you do the asset inventory and the GIS there, does it have a useful life of each of the assets? In other words, we could program capital expenditures on these as into time?
Yes, absolutely.
To me, that would be the use of that, or a very good use of it.
Yes, absolutely. And the GIS database, the shape files that we build, we turn that over to the city, and we encourage the city, like if a playground is replaced at one of the parks, to update the shape file, remove the old playground, put in the new playground. In theory, you never have to do another complete inventory again. Like right now, we're updating the City of St. Cloud's master plan. We did their complete inventory 6 years ago. They did not keep it up to date in GIS, which is fine. A lot of our clients don't have time to do that, but they gave us a list of all of the updates they made. So we went out to each of the parks, picked up those, replaced them in the inventory database quickly. It was just like 2 days of field work, and gave them their updated GIS database back. So however the city wants to use it, they can, but absolutely, you can very quickly at a glance see which ones are towards the end of their useful life.
But just like our Commissioner Wilson said, the asset was improved at which one of the parks?
Lincoln
Heights. So really that needs to be updated in that database, doesn't it? I mean, to me, it's not valuable if it's not updated.
Right. Yep.
Right. And we did change the name of that park too, so we'll have to give you that information too.
Okay.
It's Ellis Harold Park now, so we'll have to update that.
Perfect. Yep, we can update that. That's part of doing part of the plan for sure. But if you updated the park, and I don't know Lincoln Heights right off the top of my head and what was the 1.8, but a park could have had a facelift, but there's still some design and ambiance things, like we look for pedestrian access from surrounding streets and shade, and do you have signage that are indicating things? How are the accessible routes from the parking lot to the equipment? So it could legitimately be a 1.8. I just don't know off the top of my head. Okay. Absolutely. Okay, so now we move into visioning. Guiding principles, think of them as the building blocks for the recommendations. So in Zephyrhills, because you've got a really solid park system, but are missing that recreation component, very, very limited recreation component, we have two buckets of guiding principles. One of them are looking at your parks and recreation today. What can you do with what we have? This is where we're talking about your existing parks. And then parks and recreation in the future. How can you grow into your residential community? How can you grow into increasing your service for people who live in Zephyrhills, especially with all of the manufacturing you have coming in and getting people who are going to work here to live here in Zephyrhills. Besides schools and the ISO rating of the fire department, people want to know about the parks department and what kinds, where are their kids going in the summer? Where can they learn to swim? Where can we walk safely? That type of thing. So the first one, maintain and improve your existing. What can you do with what you have here? Prioritizing the maintenance and the improvements in your existing parks. That will help increase the overall functional level of service for all of your parks. You've got beautiful parks. You're very lucky to have the beautiful sites that you have, a lot of old growth trees. How can we increase those? Balance, and that's part of our challenge, is to help guide you all in that balance between what you've got and improving what you have with the continued growth of the city and the continued population growth expansion expected in the future. The implementation strategies that we're going to be looking at are improving your existing parks to meet those minimum standards that we talked about. We really recommend that if you find acreage or lots available around your existing parks, jump on that. There is nothing more efficient than expanding an existing park, expanding the acreage in an existing park. You can offer more there. It's much more efficient because it's much less expensive to maintain a 5-acre park than to maintain 5 1-acre parks. So we encourage you to expand your existing parks if those opportunities ever arise. Renovate your existing amenities. We'll help put that plan together for you. Maintain the GIS asset inventory that we've already done. Implement your Zephyr Park master plan, and then incorporate sustainability guidelines into park enhancements. That's something that we will be building as part of these as well. The second one for today is to improve the walkability and connectivity. Some of these are just going to be small things, crosswalks from adjacent residential areas into parks to make it easier and safer for residents to get to parks. Providing comfortable pathways within the parks as well. People really feel safe, and we have found that if you build it, they will come. A lot of times if there is a nice, safe walking area in a park, walking was a very high important thing for your residents and the public input. So expanding those opportunities. Providing ADA access from your parking to your amenities and then in between your amenities. Looking at an overall ADA plan for the improvements with the parks, expanding your sidewalk network where you can, pedestrian crossings we've already talked about, and then looking at potential trail connections in the future throughout the city. I know that you have some trail plans that we'll be folding in as well. So the next one on today is enhancing your user experience and comfort. And this gets down to the design and ambiance assessment that our landscape architects do as part of the inventory. So enhancing the user experience. There's a concept in park planning called the normal user. That's a crime prevention through environmental design term. We want to keep normal users in the parks as long as possible. And that means we want to have things for people to do there, that they're not getting bored, that instead of stopping by for 15 minutes, they might spend an hour there. The more normal users you have of parks, the more eyes you have on the parks. This also helps with surrounding neighborhoods. And if you all are ever talking to any of your constituents and they talk about having problems in parks, we encourage you to tell them to call 911. Over and over again, because your adjacent residents are going to be your #1 first line of defense in problems in the parks. So the police department and the parks department can be partners in identifying patterns of problems, calling 911, identifying these, and making less space for the abnormal user and more space for the normal user to encourage them to stay longer. That helps support. Yes.
I know when I was at college, they had a lot of walkways and paths up there, and they had these blue call boxes that were there. And I noticed the last time I was up there, they have cameras on them as well. I mean, what are your thoughts on those?
If you're ready to respond to them, that's great. But those types of things have been really replaced by these. So a lot of campuses still do have them. And they say, like, I have a daughter who we're doing college tours right now. And I'm listening to a lot of colleges say, if you're standing at one and you look around, you'll be able to see the next one. There are a lot of maintenance. We're not seeing a lot of them in parks along that lines with cameras. Most city attorneys will tell you if you're going to have cameras in parks, they should be monitored because it gives people the sense of if I'm in trouble, somebody's watching and is going to come for help. And if all they're doing is recording to try and catch the person after the fact, that can be problematic, but that's just, I'm not an attorney or play one on TV. So that's what I hear. So if you're going to do something like that, be ready to maintain them, be ready for a lot of false calls.
Yeah.
I think most.
And you're right. If you grab one, it better work,
Yeah.
So.
And the idea is, and I hear them say it on college campuses, if you call for help on one, but keep running, because then ideally you'll be able to see the next one. You can run to the next one and push help and then run to the next one. They can follow you. But I mean, yeah.
And I don't know because I know, can you locate somebody on a cell phone with 911?
Yeah. Okay, so where was I? Okay, so other things to enhance the user experience is, of course, the tree canopy. Preserve your large, healthy trees. Plan for mitigation if trees get removed. Good planting plans, 2 for 1, that type of thing. Adding shade as much as possible to encourage people to stay and hang out and to get exercise and blow off steam. Improve your existing parking areas, restripe them, make them more usable, functional. Lighting at parks, again, you all already have, till 10 o'clock at night. So where parks are open until 10 o'clock at night, provide lighting. I'm not talking about putting, pole mounted sports lights into the next door neighbor's bedroom window, by all means. Low level, pedestrian appropriate lighting. Again, the idea is that after work, after school in December, that people can go to the park and play on the playground at 6:30 at night and have a safe and enjoyable experience. And then incorporating the crime prevention through environmental design guidelines into the park enhancements. The fourth one is communicate offerings. This is something that as the city continues to build recreation programming, hopefully over time, a recreation person working with your public information officer and all the ways to get out, to get the word out. We did hear from the public. Interestingly enough, this always fascinates me that we hear from the public when we ask them about communication. Every way they say they prefer to receive communication, the city's already doing it. So we heard email, social media, text messages. The city's already doing that, how people are choosing to consume that information and think that they're not be communicating to. But keeping that up. And then traditional forms of communication. We learned that you all are putting notices on the outside envelopes now of utility bills, which is super cool. But being consistent about it, having people start to expect, oh, I think that we're going to hear about the summer programming in March and April. That consistency over time helps people understand a little bit more and helps build expectations. Okay, now we're going to transition to future of Parks and Recreation in Zephyrhills. So this first one is delivering park services, and this is getting at looking at your areas that are currently underserved. Really important partner here with Pasco County. They seem very willing to work with the city to help with park services and with providing that geographic access throughout there. You're also very fortunate to have state parks nearby. So we did hear from the public that nature-based recreation opportunities, you can't create wetlands and create nature areas, but if you have the opportunity, by all means preserve where you can. And then some of the guidance, again, looking at implementing the park recommendations to incorporate new park amenities, working with developers if you can, working with, partnering with them to, if they're going to build a park for you, encourage it not to be an HOA restricted lockdown park. Open public access is really important, and you get a lot more bang for your buck if you can get a developer to build it for you. But hand them your park standards and say, thanks for building a park, but we want it 2 acres and we want it to have these things. That, again, publicly supported, not something that was just grabbed out of the air. So those are all really important things that are going to help with being proactive to expanding your park services, and hopefully also keeping your costs down, looking for partnerships, again, so it's not, the onus isn't all on the city. Next one, and this is a big one, is increasing your program offerings. Whenever you are in a primarily residential community, the demand for recreation programs, places, and I don't want you to think it's just about kids, because it certainly is about kids. Everybody thinks about summer camp. What are my kids going to do in the summer? But I was telling your staff this story earlier. We were working on the City of Seminoles Recreation Master Plan in Pinellas County. And they've got a great active recreation program. Their building is much past its useful life. It was a church and then it got added onto, and it's just really awkward, but it's bustling at the seams. And they actually have a very active senior program, and they have a regular card group, and a woman didn't show up, and her card group was, I'm not sure, where's Nancy? And Nancy was at home and needed medical attention, and it was her card group that saved her life. So these things are really impactful to your community. This is where you start to know your neighbors. This is what gives people a lot of pride in where they live and who they connect with. So all ages, not just kids, sports teams, summer camps, senior programs, tiny people programs, that type of thing. To do that, you need to have obviously a facility. Looking at your existing facilities, Alice Hall we did an architectural assessment on it. It's past its useful life. It's been utilized great. Growing potentially as you move into it, some adaptive programming for people with disabilities. All of these types of programs, you need to have a facility or facilities for them to access. So looking at partnerships with the county, working with the Y, that type of thing is going to help, as well as establishing your own parks and recreation program in the future. Questions on that? I know it's a biggie. Okay. So again, I set the stage, thinking of programs, where are we going to do it? So we heard from the public, indoor sports courts, gymnasium type of thing, providing aquatics. The Y has a pool. It's a lap pool. That's very, it definitely is a place to get wet. And now Hercules has a splash pad, but that's much different than recreational aquatics and the ability to go to the pool for the day and hang out. And then a recreation center. There's great opportunities. We've talked with Pasco County. They're amenable to it. You have some great opportunities on potential buildings and partnerships to, again, not put the onus. The county doesn't have a recreation center in this area either, so hopefully it'll be a win-win in the long run.
So I just heard that they are putting one out on Handcart Road. Have you guys seen that proposal? And
I have no.
yeah, so, and it's going to have aquatics there and everything there. The plans are amazing. It's going to have everything out there, from pickleball to.
Forward that to us.
I can try.
Well,
But,
they're
yeah.
doing some in Dade City as well. They're talking about a recreation center in Dade City as well, so.
Yeah, and a recreation center here is really needed for sure in our city.
I mean, you say future, but we can get started on things like this. We can do things at different city-owned facilities. We can do, we can use the depot. We can use Alice Hall while it's here,
Absolutely, yes.
and different facilities. So we can start programs, and we don't need one building right now. We can start it.
But we have.
get into it and, build as you go.
Absolutely. And we would never recommend you, especially since you have a summer program at Alice Hall, we would never recommend you get rid of that until you have a place to put it. So it's all a nuanced, layered approach. Getting a person here, a recreation programmer here, is really your first step. And the reason why is that person is going to be able to go out into the community, leverage partnerships, work with the healthcare system, work with the Y, and really start to open up some of those inroads and how we can better provide recreation services to the city of Zephyrhills. And it's, you start somewhere, and having a person who can focus on that. You've got Hercules Park, very low cost startup to have movies in the park. In the winter, they're popular in Florida because it gets dark early and you can start a movie at 6:30 and be out of there by 9 o'clock. But, buying the big blow up screens and the projector is really not a huge capital outlay, but you need to have staff to program that and advertise it. So you can start small and start to build it over time. The other thing with recreation services, and this is like a whole other discussion, is there is a philosophy on how not everything should be free. So just because you are starting to provide recreation services doesn't mean that they're all free. Now, a movie in the park, that's probably something that's free. It's a special event, it's open to the public, it's got a really broad public purpose. When you get to more narrow, more individualized benefits, those are things that you probably should be charging for. An individual swim lesson, an individual pickleball lesson. The benefit is to the person taking the lesson and not the greater community. So I don't want you to think that just because you're starting to provide recreation programming that everything's going to be free and it's just going to be a money pit. You just need people to start putting that together for you.
Right, and that's what other communities do. I mean,
Absolutely.
Seminole does that, Temple Terrace does it.
Everybody does it.
When we
Bradenton
started,
has a great recreational center with a pool and
Right.
but it
Newport
costs
Richie,
it
not,
costs
yeah.
to belong, but it's not a lot. And there's no, and there's probably scholarships available to children who are in need.
Scholarships, and having those scholarships set by with direction from elected officials. Fee differentials. Now, if you're partnering with Pasco County is probably not going to want you to charge more for unincorporated Pasco County residents versus city residents. So those are all things that have to be worked through, but it's very doable. Everybody in Florida has that challenge.
Mr. Chair, would a partnership with the Y on something like that you had mentioned, because they have just a multitude of programs and they have the experience running these things.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see something there where we could do some satellite programs in conjunction with the Y. And they're in that business and we're not really. I mean,
Most cities are though.
some of them do it better than others. So
Sure, absolutely. And there are, like, for years, this is one I know off the top of my head, for years, the city of Winter Park had the YMCA run their pools. They don't anymore. The city took them back, but that's very common. When I was a Parks and Recreation director, the Y ran the summer camp. There were 3 Ys in the city, and they had the city summer camp and the gym and the pool that I was the director for, and everybody worked together, and it was great. That doesn't always happen everywhere,
right.
But it's wonderful if everybody has a purpose to keep people active, keep people healthy, have a place for people to recreate. As long as it can get challenging, but we definitely encourage that. Schools are another huge one. Partnerships with schools in Florida can be really challenging because it's very rare that it's a school board, like the school board of Pasco County it's at a school board level, doesn't typically give direction to all the schools to allow public access to school grounds after hours. I think schools are a great place for recreation after hours and on the weekends when the schools are closed. But oftentimes in Florida, it's left up to the individual principal.
Oh, and we have an after-school program at the middle school,
right?
And it's very popular and sells out. And if we could utilize more spaces for that purpose, would be awesome.
But you see how you need somebody to coordinate all this?
I think that's the idea.
Yeah.
We hire somebody who coordinates, And then they can work, I mean, even if it's initial, we could do, yoga at Hercules. We could do basketball at the Y with the gym, swim lessons. We could use we've used portables at the high school for different things, and it doesn't have to just be athletics. I mean, everybody's not athletic, so
Right.
you could do a music program at the school or something. So yeah, but I think we're growing to the point where we're going to need a recreational director that can help us get coordinated. We can farm things out and then grow as until we can maybe have our own.
And by the way, a lot of those instructor-led programs, those instructors are not city staff. Typically what happens is your recreation department, well, somebody says, hey, I want to teach underwater basket weaving at Zephyr Park. How do I do that, City of Zephyrhills? So they come in, there's a contractual instructor form, you do the background check to make sure that they aren't, bad people. And the city would collect the registrations, they would collect the money, all the revenue comes in the city cuts the check to the instructor for 60% of whatever the revenue is. Costs the city very little, and you're providing more and more recreation programs. So
And you do that with yoga and all kinds of things.
not usually summer camps and things like that, but the specialty programs for sure. Yoga, a lot of fitness programs are that way. A lot of private lessons like swim lessons, tennis lessons, that's very typical. Yep.
Good, thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, one more thing. So one of the things I noticed on page, the page that's entitled the 10-minute walk. So you talk about Transplant Park, it's in the list, but Transplant Park is not noted in there. They're actually, the circle that is the park desert is actually in the CRA. And I think that we can use CRA funding to capture some of those smaller maybe it's not 2 acres in the middle of the old part of downtown, but and we're talking about the area between north and south and east of 301.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that area, again, there's, there might be an opportunity to use part of the middle school's recreational grounds. They have a little basketball court there, but also what's not mentioned on here is dog parks. So I have a lot of inquiries from people in our community. They say, you have one dog park and I need another one. And we have opportunity in, for example, properties that we own for things like lift stations and things like that, even if it's a little sliver of land, if that could be used for a dog park. And then the other thing that Commissioner Spina mentioned was, yoga at Hercules, but the Veterans Memorial Park has so much opportunity for programming. We had a bad storm, lost some trees, but that could be, we could plant some trees and make that more so that every park maybe has a different character. That's a quiet park. I walk there with my girlfriend every morning and there's hardly anyone there. There's neighbors walking their dogs there, but I think there's a missed opportunity if we had some events for veterans there and had some seating and things like that. But I'll save these ideas for a workshop, where we actually talk about our parks, the low hanging fruit that we could do immediately with existing funds or, in the first quarter of our first fiscal year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, the sky's the limit on things like that. The one thing I want to caution you about is having quote unquote unsanctioned activities like a yoga class that's not running through the city because you don't know who that person is. If they get hurt in a city park, it's much better to have a formalized program where they're an instructor who's been background checked. If they are organizing something in your park, I just would caution you to make sure that, because the city would have the insurance on that and all of that to make sure it's.
Yeah, and we could do it in Alice Hall or something. That was just.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's to throw out ideas.
Yeah.
But I mean, just, I think that we need to, make sure they're sanctioned and all that.
Boot camps are another thing, because boot camp instructors love poured in place rubberized playground surfacing. So the city of Orlando has a big problem with boot camps popping up because they're under the cover of darkness or at like 5 a.m. bouncing around on the playground equipment. It's great use for playground equipment when kids aren't out there. But Orlando had one guy who was wrapping a pull-up bar with chains over the crossbar for the swing. And it was every time they were jumping up and trying to do pull-ups, they were wearing through the powder coat on the swings. Like, you just want to protect your investment. So I would encourage you to, especially if the police department is seeing things under the cover of darkness, to try and jump on that and not let it happen, because the liability, I think, can be detrimental.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we're almost done. Expanding opportunities. We've actually talked about all of this for the most part. Fee structure, approach, and philosophy. I've talked about that a little bit, and the who benefits if it's a broad community benefit. Really focusing on partnerships, looking at funding the department, making sure it's sustainable and doesn't become a burden. So then finally, and this is my last slide, I understood I had an hour and I'm going to come in early, darn it. The next steps, future expansion, we've talked about that. The visioning, we talked about that. So the next thing that you're going to see from us is the capital improvement plan and the recommendations on how much all of this is going to cost. So we'll have a list of the improvements to your existing park facilities, cost of renovating your existing parks and recreation facilities outlined for 10 years. I already mentioned we're going to look at any available funds for this fiscal year, and then for fiscal year 25-26 here, so the city can start to build some of our early recommendations in even before the plan is finalized. And then other recommendations that are going to further those guiding principles for Zephyrhills today and tomorrow. And that's it. I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I have some concerns. You had mentioned earlier about, Shane, maybe you can tell me, how many of our parks do have restrooms currently?
Off the top of my head. Or, you mean neighborhood park?
Yeah.
Like a Zephyr Park would have.
Zephyr Park, Hercules Park, those
Yeah.
parks should absolutely have restrooms. Yes.
Dallas Herald Park wouldn't have a restaurant
Yeah.
because it's right in the neighborhood. So
The
that-
Depot Park does, but there's a building associated with that. So you have outdoor activities, outdoor activities at the depot.
And another thing I liked that you had talked about was lighting. I think that's a big deal in all the parks. A lot of them don't have good lighting, and I think even in Zephyr Park, we could use a lot more lighting. We closed the park, at 10 o'clock? So, I mean, that's some of the things I like. Did you bring up the skate park?
I did not bring up a skate park.
I didn't see it on the list.
That's part of
Part of
cruising.
probably.
Oh. Oh, is it
Uh,
considered part of cruising?
Part of cruising, yes, sir.
Okay. Oh, duh, it's there. Okay. Forgive me. I see it. And
We'd be here till tomorrow if I talked about every park and every amenity in every park.
Talked about the Z venue. Correct me if I'm wrong, Billy, but that's airport property. I was told that's eventually going to be hangars, and it's already got a plan of action. So why would we add that to this? That is confusing,
That
doesn't
won't have
make sense
hangars
to
there.
me.
There won't be hangars there. That's right next to residential.
Right.
But it is airport property, but we
But he has a
lease it.
master plan
Hmm.
for it. Yeah.
ALP shows South Avenue being relocated to the north. That would be on the north side of the event center, and then being able to put hangars there. But I don't know that that's the direction that we're going to go
I
right
think
now.
it'll change that. Okay. Because I've seen those and was told all about that. Okay. So, yeah.
But we have an agreement, we lease it, but it is,
No,
it is
I
kind
know
of got probably a certain lifeline to
Yeah,
it that
yeah, I
at some point that acreage will not be.
Right. Yeah.
There.
Eventually it's going to be used up for airport
Yeah, a
stuff
good point.
that we wouldn't want to invest a lot of money, but we've already invested money and it's sitting there wasted. So, we do need to rethink that probably, but what does it mean to rethink that?
You have this if we have the recreational director or
Agreed.
an employee, that person could then work with a
Yes,
bigger regional group to try to
Absolute.
get like festivals and things there, because
Absolute.
it's just a great venue for a large event, but not smaller events.
Right.
And there have been events there, and there was a circus there a couple of weeks ago. I don't know what that was about, but they had huge tent and different things. So it is getting used, but not really by us.
Yeah,
I mean,
not enough.
Right.
And
but
it's large acreage, so if there
It's
is,
12 acres.
yeah, but for Zephyrhills, that's large acreage.
Mhm.
And so the recommendation would not be to convert it to a community park that's got a lot of big features, investing in, for instance, Bermuda Fields or anything. But when you talk about your close to home parks, a playground, a sports court, walking areas, those aren't huge investments. And if the airport's not going to improve it in the next 10 years, if you put in a playground, it's either going to be near the end of its useful life or you can relocate it. So we're not talking about things that are really, really expensive to build that you are going to be tearing down in the near future.
Okay. And it does butt up to Ellis Harold or Lincoln Park.
right, yeah,
But,
Ellis Harold
yeah.
Park.
Ellis Harold.
Okay, thank you. Any other?
I just had one more thing. I'm sorry, you guys. I would like to see us, because we've been talking about Zephyr Park for a long time.
Mhm.
And after the floods, I'd like to see us prioritize Zephyr Park. And I know a lot of the parks need stuff, but I'd really like to get something done on that park, because we've been talking about doing that park for a long time now. And now that we've had that terrible storm, it also gives us an idea on when not to put things
Right.
and where to put things. And I,
Have the stormwater aspect of that, that hopefully will help us get funding, to improve the lake and the circulation of water through the space. And that's really a great asset for that park, I think. We don't have water on any of our other parks, yeah.
Yeah, so Zephyr Park is under design currently, different consultant, but they've had conversations. We've had conversations with the design team. They were out there right after the storm. They've marked where the flooding, what the flooding level was. So they're redesigning, taking all of that flooding into consideration. So that should be, I don't know the time frame.
I just wouldn't want to see all new equipment underwater.
No. We made
If
sure.
God forbid, something that
We've had
terrible ever hit us.
2 or 3 meetings since October or since the storm to assess all of that.
Okay, all right.
Billy, have you met with them since our appropriation for the storm water management aspect of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they actually helped us put language in the appropriation request. So we're requesting, was it 5 million? We requested 5 million appropriation, which was sponsored by both representative and the senator. So hopefully we'll get that. We were funded 500,000, 600,000 last year. And so that's what's helping do some of the design and some playground equipment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Chair, I know the park board is here. Maybe they have some
We're going
questions.
to
or
get it
comments.
to other people.
Okay.
I just want to thank you, and that was an excellent presentation.
Thank you for having us. I love being here.
All right, and don't go far because we're going to.
I won't, but if they're going to come to the podium,
Questions.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Ricardo, did you
Yes.
have anybody signed up to speak?
Grab the clipboard real quick.
Okay,
Confirm.
all right. Ricardo's going to check the clipboard to see if anybody signed up to speak, and then we'll check with the audience and the park board. Yes, in a minute. In a second.
So, my name is Richard Graff. I've lived here a very, very long time.
Can you state your name into the microphone and your address,
Is
please?
this on?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Richard Graff. Last name is spelled Graf. Got that, sir? Thank you. I want to specifically talk about the dog park. I'm a very frequent user of the dog park. This is what I hear from the other people that use the dog park. One, there's no lighting. Zero, zip, nada. It's open till 10. That doesn't make any sense. The park can't be used by people in the evening because there's no lighting. The storm has deleted a lot of the trees. That's a bit of a problem. The park in itself, I know you, wherever that young lady is.
I'm right here.
1.8? I disagree with that. I don't know what you use for criteria. I've been to many dog parks. That dog park's in very poor shape. There's nothing for the people to do. Recently, you put in benches that are helpful. There's no shade anymore because the trees have been decimated. The watering system is a plastic bucket chained to a fence with a hose in it. Now, come on. Really? It's not even sanitary for the dogs. So many people use that park. Many people in the Zephyr area live in mobile home parks. They don't have facilities that their dog can even go to the bathroom in. So they use the dog park because it's necessary for them. People congregate there, and I've met many friends because people congregate there with their dogs, and everybody has a commonality because they all have dogs. And I'll bet many of the people that live in Zephyrhills and the Zephyrhills area have dogs and would appreciate a dog park that's appropriate.
Agreed.
Okay?
Agreed.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Totally agree.
Okay, Ricardo, we have other,
Yes, sir. Lucinda Smith.
I see you over there, Mr. Worrell. Dog park.
My name's Lucinda Smith. I live at 38235 C Avenue. This is great. We're putting in a new park. I live right next door to the park. I see motorized scooters. I see mini bikes. I see nothing but damage to this park. And we want to build a new one when we can't control what we have now. I called the police department. They passed me to Pasco County. I'm sorry, the park's on Zephyrhills side of the road. I just want to see more action out there. I want to see the cops patrol that area more often. Yes, I called the cops. They came out, talked to me and my husband, got our input, went up and down the road twice that day, and I haven't seen them since. It's great. We want a new park, but let's take care of what we have. Thank you.
all right, thank you very much. Yes. Ricardo?
Joyce Burgess.
Okay. Oh, you're for the, okay.
Isabella Lopez.
Come on down.
Thank you. So first of all, I wanted to thank you so much for the invitation. So I came because I wanted to talk about the dog park too. So I have a dog and I have a lot of neighbors that have dogs too. And then we love Zephyrhills and we love like how the city is growing up. We moved here 1 year ago, which is not a long time, but we see like how the city is constantly like looking for progress and looking for new things. So that's why I came to talk about the dog parts, which you expressed everything that I wanted to say. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is kind of like have a park where you can have everything at the same time. For example, I went to the Hercules Park and I love it because the park is beautiful, but then I miss the dog park over there. Um, and for me it's great to have like all the generations on like the same place, so it's not just like having a kids park or like a dog park. It's great to see everyone, like the whole community. I like to share time with kids, but I like to share time with seniors. I like to share time with like people of my same age. So it's great to have a place that we can all like be on the same like space. um because we share many stuff like with everyone. So not separate things is kind of like having a place where we can
Everything.
have
Right,
like
right. Multi-purpose,
Multi-generational.
yes,
multi-use.
like
Right.
places, just like not to separate everyone. It's more like have a reunion of like all the generations, everyone who lives in the different like areas. So those were like the 2 points that I really wanted to see in my city. I wanted to for sure work together with you too if you need anything from our neighbor or anything that we can help with too. But thank you so much.
All right,
And
thank you very much.
that might be what Zephyr Park is everything,
Yeah.
at our big park,
Yes, pretty
right.
much everything because I've seen that some of them are like pretty much like just dog
Yep,
park,
yep.
one just
Yes.
for pets and
Mm-hmm.
one
Mm-hmm.
just to walk. So I've seen like many different parks here in Florida where you can like actually go in and see like different like populations. So I like to see that and I enjoy it a lot. So thank you so much.
All right, thank
Thank you,
you. Thank you
everyone.
very much.
That's all that I've signed up.
Okay, would anyone else like to speak?
Joe Worrell, been a resident of Zephyrhills for 37 years. Pardon me?
We need your name and address. Joe Worrell.
Address is 5335 Bernadette Drive, and been here for 37 years. I'm here to talk about the dog park. The dog park is a diamond in the rough. Let me tell you, I've been to 5 different dog parks in Pinellas County. They have more facilities, but they don't have the space that you have. You've been in Dade City's dog park? It's postage stamp. People come from Dade City, they come to our dog park. Now, we have an immediate need for shade. When the hurricane came, we lost all of our shade. We also lost a bench. They came within the last 2 weeks, took away 2 good benches, put 2 new benches that are half the size. If you could bring the old benches back to replace the ones that we lost, but we do need shade as quickly
And
as
shade
possible.
structure, maybe it's not the trees, maybe it's shade structure of some sort. Maybe it's shade structure of some
Anything
sort. That
straight
doesn't
shade
have to
structure.
be
We
a
have
tree,
zero
but
right
yeah,
now.
we did lose a lot of trees in that park.
And then, of course, we've got a redneck water system.
Right, we've been round and round with Mr. LeBlanc. Yeah.
5-gallon bucket from Lowe's, which somebody brought, and a hose. And I know you've got a nice one over in Hercules Park. It's a big one. So you do know that they exist.
And Mr. Worrell, for the record, I recall that we talked about the kind of surface around the water because concrete gets very hot in the summertime, so it burns the dogs' pads when they're standing there drinking the water, and that we have the segregation of the big dogs and the small dogs. That's another thing you told me about. So all of that's been recorded and it is on the list. I mean, but we really need, we're going to need a designer to help us to really redesign the park. But that's one of those parks that I feel like is low hanging fruit that we could really make it spectacular. And we need another one. We know that we need another one on the north side of town, and we need some smaller ones dispersed throughout the older part of downtown, in my
Make them
opinion.
too small because then people will not go to them.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we're here to
Yeah.
come up with, I mean, that's
Perfect.
part of what we're doing and that's why we're meeting.
Perfect.
That'll be part of
Yeah.
the next phase of how to improve and what we want and we get input and everything.
So the land, help me to know, you guys know this better than me, the land behind the dog park out there, all that vacant land, is that city land or is that owned by
Or what?
Meadowwood? But it's open land, right? So it might be land that could be some purchased to improve that park. I just wondered if it was our land or theirs. Okay.
Anybody else like that? Do we have any comments from the park board? Okay.
Dave Walters, Chair of the Zephyrhills Parks and Recreation Board, 8402 Angela Court in Zephyrhills. First and foremost, congratulations on the design, construction, and the opening of Hercules Park. That is a true gem, and thank you for allowing all of us to be a part of that. It was an amazing event. It's an amazing park, and you guys should be very proud. The reason I stand now is there were talks of negotiations with Pasco County for regional parks out towards the San Pasco area. Is there an update, Billy, or do we know anything more about what's going on with that? Or you mentioned to me once before about something on the south side or the east side of Chansey?
There's been conversations on the south side of Chansey, but I've not had any further conversations on that.
So there's nothing new in regard. I know they were talking about partnerships with the county. Have we done as part?
So
for
we've
this
had a
part?
conversation about a joint use at Cruisin', but again, that was very preliminary conversations and we've not had any follow-ups at this point.
I'm not sure we'd really want too many more park land. That's kind of our industrial corridor and the airport's there. And it's at the end of,
Let me
the
interrupt you real
line.
quick. What Dave's talking about is there's county-owned property on the south side of Chansey around the fire station that's there. And there was conversations about utilizing that county-owned lot or that county-owned property as park property. So it wouldn't be taking anything off the tax roll or
I
any
know it
currently
wouldn't, but I'm
industrial.
just saying that that kind of use in that location is kind of the end of the road.
Right.
We need more up on this end.
Right. What they were
going
saying,
north.
what I had heard was they were considering park property across from San Pasco, developing another, whether it be Little League fields or baseball fields, and turning San Pasco into soccer fields. So if there was an update to that, because I didn't know about the Handcart Road project, so I'm really intrigued by that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Else? Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Hamilton, we'll go to the second item, which is.
So we're going to take a break for about 15 minutes before
okay.
we set up the next for the CRA master plan.
All right. All right.
So we can adjourn this one.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
I got to get a little.
I'll have my. I don't get it when I'm sleeping, but when I sit for a long time, when I go to stand up, it's like I'm like frozen into place.
What is each one a sealant? Is each box is a sealant?
You make any homemade potato salad?
Is Miss Sanders still here? I saw her earlier. I need to get a document from her.
We are in design, and when we get to, they're going to show something, I'll make sure you know about it. Good. Okay. And the house looks great. I drove by there the other day. So good.
Thank you. I just I don't know what the security just I should have said something. You know, I don't know. I'm sitting on the couch with my husband.
The parks director of the public.
I mean, you know where my house is. Water park.
Right into the park. No, I took them up to my office. I'll give them a look. Sorry, I'm talking about myself. And listen, since we started all of this, I will go to the park at different times of the day and walk it just to see what's going on, who's in there, what's going on. And it's scary to go in there at night. The amount of findings and needles that I have seen in that park on the ground is amazing.
And it's just amazing how people approach you, and, and I'm like, you guys need to clean that park up with bad crap that happens.
Send me an email.
Okay.
Send me an email.
Okay.
Okay?
Because I should have probably done it. I caught, I thought that was just.
But I am so glad you came.
Now, since you're looking at it from each of your viewpoints on your own. You can't, no. You can blow something up in this class.
All right, I'll talk to you soon. Did Claudia talk to you? Okay.
That's fine. I'll be able to see more. I can't be able to. Yeah. Gentlemen,
What's going on,
I
Charlie?
picked a chicken bacon ranch.
Cranberry walnut chicken salad.
Sounds interesting.
You doing all right?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
We brought it up. To show the impact of investing in park.
I'm just gonna turn off your mic.
Oh, thank you. Please do.
Good. It's very good. Why?
That's a lot more doable.
You got it.
Yeah. That was the only time I ever.
You drinking any, just water?
Just water. Yeah. Yesterday was. You know what?
A big box, bunch of boxes of food over there.
What are we doing?
Offenders, do you get like videos from online already?
She says she doing those every day.
Oh, that's great.
Supposed to be in Tampa. That's it.
Good damn thing, I'll get these bastards going. I've done a 48 one before. And I've done an involuntary 72 before. I've done about like 10 pounds when I did that. I bet you lost.
Well, as we were designing the Hercules Park, that's kind of the way we felt about it.
It's good for you.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And they got hit pretty hard with the school.
Oh, yeah, but long in the tooth.
I agree. That was really good.
Robin did it.
Innovated. When I got
Mm-hmm.
Why the hell did he have a soda in his nightstand? Didn't his mom ever get on to him for eating in bed?
What's that, Mike?
Well, I think that's what it takes, a little bit of investment, and then and you do away with, like the lady was saying, some of the nefarious stuff that's going on. They don't feel like they're welcome there anymore.
that part, it's almost 15 different. That's one of those lighting. Other than now's what it's.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We had, oh, and the.
Yeah, you can take one. I have it though.
Yeah.
Pretend I'm eating.
I just wanted to reiterate that it's an economic development, not just an amenity. People.
Wholeheartedly on that.
And I think, look, the dog park, that is the least impact.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say this, that men lose it way quicker than women. You know, twice as fast.
Two.
Well, and that's the thing. It's relatively low investment.
Oh, absolutely.
And
High returns.
a high return, because you hurt every single one of these people.
Well, you go up there, you see all the townhouses.
A lot of her caloric intake is from. Oh, get it through. They don't eat hard. I used to work for me. And,
I had one.
amazing.
Oh, yeah, there's been a bunch of those coming lately.
Yeah. I called them the first time and they said we would never send you a text.
Yeah, I just logged onto my account because
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's a big one right
They
now.
were, oh, a lot of
I can
scams,
tell on that thing.
a lot of scams and senior default reports.
Oh, I know.
Melanie,
Up to the tune of $60 million a year in the US.
I'm the new judge.
It's incredible how vigilant you have to be now with emails, text messages, phone calls, everything.
Is it from something?
Is it- Yeah. No, that's exactly right.
I called. Please don't know.
And I showed him one a couple months ago. He goes, "Ooh, man, that was pretty good."
I had called and come to. Talk to him.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Talks for like 30 seconds and see you.
She says we
Yeah,
have
we're
30
good.
seconds to finish.
Okay, I'll recall the CRA, all the council, mayor, and city manager are here, and Miss Hamilton.
All righty. So moving on, up now we have our CRA master plan, the workshop. This is a draft plan presentation. Claudia is going to present broad themes, vision, ideas on the CRA and our work plan. If you have any questions, if you have any issues with what we're talking about, now's the time. We've got this presentation, and then there's 2 more steps before we are finished with the plan. So if we're going to change anything, we need to do it now. Okay. So let me bring up Claudia and we'll get started. Oh, I'm sorry, and I didn't introduce. Also tonight we have Tom Kohler, also with GAI. And I do not. They're locked up in the
Good evening, welcome, thank you.
Good evening. I was going to say good afternoon. I guess we can say good evening. It's kind of weird when you go to Spain, 7 p.m., still afternoon, which is
Okay.
always throws me off, of course, because I have dinner. I'm going to set up my timer. It's going to actually hit a 30-minute mark to make sure. My name is Claudia Ray. I'm a senior urban planner and designer in GI. And as you may know, I have been working in your CRA plan for a while, and we're going to see it tonight. Next. Oh, I have a clicker. Fabulous. Thank you. Sorry about that. So our agenda for today is we're going to, kind of outline where our assignment was, our plan process and timeline. We're going to do a quick area overview. I'm going to go over some of the community input takeaways that we did from the survey and the in-person meeting that we had here. And then the bulk, and when I say bulk again, of the presentation is going to be the draft master plan. Then I actually have, since my presentation is a little bit longer than Kristen, I do have more photos, so we're going to do an interactive activity. So I'm going to kind of need everyone to take off their phone, and we'll explain on what to do, and we'll display the results at the end, and then we'll do discussions and questions. But you also free to stop me, ask questions. I'm going to try to keep up pace. So we're doing a live polling for the few people that are still here and have your phones. And what you can do for now is you can scan this QR code. And you guys too, yes? Over there
for be able to, the poll to be launched, you need to input the code over there, and then Ricardo's going to help me at the end to get some of the results showing up, and we're going to tag team in here and make this work. So this is a test for everyone. And what I'm going to do is, I was going to do this at the end, but the presentation is so long that I'll be cueing you when to do the next question. So if you go there, the first question is pretty much going to ask you kind of who you are, so you can identify yourself. Are you a resident? Are you a business owner? Are you a commissioner? Are you city staff? Are you a visitor? So just like do the first one and pretty much stop there, and then I'll cue you for the next one.
But can you go back for a
Oh,
second?
sorry about that. Did everyone got it? Yes. Sorry, no. Did it work?
Oh, I got it. Oh.
And also you can do it, are you seeing your presentation in your screens? In these computers? Yeah. Oh, the presentation is only up there. Okay, got it. I sit in several boards and I get the presentation to say, you got it? Can we move on? All righty. Because I have a lot to cover. So our assignment is to, of course, update your existing plan that was created in 2016 and do kind of a comprehensive update to envision what is going to happen with the future CRA for the next 10 years. And I put the plus sign in there because after drafting this plan, it's going to keep you busy for a while. So it can be 10 years and a little bit more. So it's not going to be a stop at 10 years. We identify new capital improvement projects, infill redevelopment sites. This is a redevelopment plan. So, we're here for redevelopment. We also have some ideas about attracting new businesses and jobs, continue supporting the existing building. That's something that we hear. Another thing is the streamline regulations and process for redevelopment, and update, of course, your fund, your TIF. And then we don't have the TIF projections today. We actually are working on it, but that's going to be kind of our next step. So what Gil mentioned before about our CRA plan process, so it's like a 5-step process. We started with what I call listening and learning, which we do a site reconnaissance. We review all your previous plans that have been done so far regarding the CRA and citywide. We gather some community input, and we met with stakeholders, which is mainly your city staff. Then after that, we actually did an existing conditions and market report, which it was delivered. It's a very comprehensive report. We cover a lot about demographics, your current market conditions. In that part, we also review your CRA design standards and city land development code, and have some parcel characteristics analysis in there. We presented that existing conditions report to a working group meeting, and I believe Commissioner, you guys like to go, Spina was there when we presented the area assessment and market report a while back. So we are here today on the draft plan presentation, which is going to cover, items that we did in step 1 and step 2. So I'll give you a quick overview on that, but we will not go a lot in depth on 1 and 2. If you would like to see a little, those report, I can have Gail send it to you, or they will be incorporated also in the final plan document. But we're going to focus today on the vision and guiding principles, what we're calling our big move, and our goals and objectives. After we do this, we want to kind of hear from you, get some comments, do some prioritization, and that's why the Mentimeter, the code is. We're going to get those, and then we're going to wrap that up and actually create the draft plan document. Once the draft document is created, we'll include our TIF projections, we'll include our CIP plan, what are the timeline, because this is a 10-year plan. So we try to estimate a little more what we can do in 10 years. But as you know, every year CRA has to do a work plan. So even though we anticipated this time year, you still have to reassess what your projects are going to be every year. And then we're aiming for final plan and adoption in July. Area overview for, I know you're very familiar with your CRA boundary. This is mainly for the few members of the public. What is exact boundaries, what you see on the right of the screen. It's about 1.3 square miles. So it's a relatively small CRA. So it goes from Hercules Park on the north a little bit. The school is not included, all the way to Zephyr Park and C Avenue on the south. And on the east, it's 16th Street, 7th Street. And on the west, it's like 1st Street, and also neither the cemetery nor the schools are included. And then you have a little bit going on the west on 5th Avenue towards, some of that area over there by the creek. The residents that we have within the CRA, we're about 3,300. So compared to the city, that has approximately 19,000 residents, we do have 306 business within the CRA compared to the city, which 888. And then in terms of employment, we have 1741 compared to the city is 10,600 in average. A lot of people, even when we were doing the engagement and hearing people talk, here are some of the things that they mentioned that they love about the city. So the City Hall complex, their murals, our Main Street, our historic and heritage and our character, and the parks. I mean, you guys hear about the parks. I hear a few people were very passionate about dog parks. But within the CRA, of course, we have the two of your feature parks, which is Hercules Park and Zephyr Park. But we also hear at the beginning things that we need to improve, which is, in terms of connectivity and bike and ped, our roads and the streets. Some streets are missing sidewalks. We all know about that, and we know that you're working in that, and that's part of the plan. Flooding and stormwater. When we started this project, this was brought up, but it got intensified after Helene and Milton, as you may know. So initially, our main conversation we're talking about a lot of alleys and street, and then slowly has shifted to flood mitigation and management eventually. So we'll talk about that too, because it's part of the infrastructure and the alleys, of course. So we review all your ongoings and previous plan. I read each one of them. So what we are trying to do is build up of what you've done before. We're not starting from scratch. There are some great ideas in all these plans, and we did our best to incorporate them into this plan update. So it's almost like an inventory. So there were a couple neighborhood plans that actually also GI did, the Little Bit Loud and the Oakside and Zephyr Park neighborhood plan. In terms of mobility, you guys been working on the redesign and the concept for 301 for a really long time. So that's ongoing. So the sidewalk master plan, and you've been implementing some of that. A stormwater master plan has been, you guys did it. We know. Tom read it. He gave me the summary of the plan, and a civil engineer in our office also read it, and we got some ideas over there that can be utilized with some of those. And of course, you have Zephyr Park, which I hear is still on design. And, Hercules Park was actually here when we started, and I was complaining it's not. But another ongoing plans that we know, the planning team, it's also doing, which is your citywide mobility plan, your comp plan updates, and Kristen and Gail are doing the citywide master plan. So this is a slide that it's a little bit updated, but I still think it's a little bit relevant. And the updated one is the one that it has Pasco County wave. So Pasco County is among one of the fastest growing counties in the state of Florida. And this is a 2020 data, compared to that. And the reason that we have to here, because when we talk about redevelopment, it's people moving in. So we have to make sure that there's enough homes, there's enough infrastructure, and enough things for people to do also. We already have the parks components and rec component, but we also have to provide office, retail, jobs, industrial. And we did actually also right now, even though Zephyrhills has 19,000 residents and you guys are small town compared to other ones, but your population growth is exponential compared. So you are growing, you grow the past decade 64%. So it's a big percentage. You can see other bigger cities might have more population, but the growth, it's a smaller percentage. And that is probably going to keep happening. Also, the other layer thing that we did, and this is when I say we are reusing, this is information that we gathered for the Oakside neighborhood park that we did. So if you've seen it before, yes, you have seen it before. When we say here, it's like, okay, what is the population or migration flow, that is moving, who's moving to Pasco County? And the majority of the people are coming from Hillsborough and Pinellas. So that is telling us that there's going to be people probably coming from Tampa, the SMP area, probably being displaced by the price of homes, et cetera, and slowly moving to the east, okay, and maybe Lakeland. And then we also noticed a lot of people, and this happened also in the pandemic, moving from New York, New Jersey, and other states to here. So this is a trend that we see throughout the state of Florida, and it's also happening in Zephyrhills. So we need to keep track of people, okay, when we're thinking about growth. So the top two numbers over here, the same projection that I just mentioned, how we are increasing our population actually, and then we has growth in the city, 65%. This is just data specific for the CRA. So we do estimate by the year 2042, and that's when your CRA plan sunsets, that's why we use that number, it's going to increase 30%. Then employees, we're going to see kind of 42% of the screen increase. So those are significant numbers. I know maybe when you say 2,000, it doesn't sound a lot, but compared to, the size of the city, it is. So that's why we like to use percent. So what does that mean when we think about redevelopment? And like I say, our market report has 30 pages. This is only like the summary of 3 of them because I didn't want to bore you guys. We'll send the more details on it. But just a sneak peek, so you say, so the CRA will need to accommodate 260,000 square foot of new commercial space and 462 new housing units by 2040, that's the projection, to support the population and employment projection. So as a redevelopment agency, that's what we want to do. And we wrote scenarios. This is in a moderate scenario. We do low, moderate, and high. And all those are in the report. And this is going to then every year help us inform what we need to work for the next, 2, 3, 4 years. And like I say, it's scenario planning pretty much what we do. So, but data, I always say that when you do planning, it's a little bit combination of arts and science. This is a science. The arts is what you know. This is your city, so you also know about growth. Any questions before I move to community input? Okay, community input, there's only 4 slides in here. By the way, the entire presentation has 60 slides. I forgot to say that. So in community input, we came here and we did a presentation. It was an introduction of the project. And at the end, we did an exercise mainly asking people to put in a map, put in a map and tell us the things that they like and value about the CRA and the things that they want to see improved. That's basically the questions that we did. We had approximately 40 participants, and counting all the dots and all the post-it, we had almost like 150 comments. People were making their comments. Then we ran that sentence exercise online. It was pretty successful. I think we have 154 plus participants. Thank you to the public information officer that I just saw him. He did a really good job in getting, and we had almost 250 comments. It was a lot of comments, but thank you to AI, helped me shrink a lot of these comments into bigger buckets. So this one over here, it kind of highlights the things that the community likes and value, which matches a little bit to my previous slide that I mentioned. So art actually came up pretty high on the list. Residents shows an appreciation of local arts, but also kind of, they also say that we need more. And that's in the next slide. They do like the city hall. There was a lot of comments about we like and dots over there about city hall complex, churches and school in the area. A lot of them, of course, love the history and the heritage of the place. And that kind of also small town feel that we wanted to make sure that we preserve. The neighborhoods, even though there is a lot of complaint, it's still a fairly walkable neighborhood in the CRA compared to, other communities in the suburbs. Of course, Zephyr Park was one of them when we ran this. Hercules Park was still on construction, so no comments on that, but I'm sure it will make it to here. I appreciate the parks and amenity. But here in the previous presentation about maintenance, also we did hear we would like to see the park maintained as well. We love it, but and of course your main street and local businesses, it's they actually listed a lot of business in there. Sometimes for me, for public record purposes, I don't like to put them, but there's a lot of business that people listed and were very specific. So as you can see, there's a considerable amount of things that they say that they want to see improve. So like I say, they love art. It's funny because a lot of things like we love this, but so they gave us the solution. So desire for more art. And that's something that we hear throughout. In terms of, we did talk about walkability. People talk about walkability, but it's two things that they actually mention. They want more wider sidewalk, of course, more sidewalks, bike lanes, and at the same time, enhancement on your streetscape. The lighting, the trees, similar to those basic items that you need also for a park that Kristen was mentioned. Also, about the alley, they wanted just to see it improve, put asphalt on it. Let's start utilizing the alleys. Flooding actually came out a lot, and this was even before Helene and Milton. I wouldn't imagine how that would jump after that hurricane, but we can talk about it. When we talk to them about local businesses, the two topics that came up are restaurants and places, venues for entertainment. And then at the same time for that is, of course, they love their events. And I know you guys do a lot of events because I follow your social media, but they still want a little more diversity on that. So if you're doing a market, but when we're thinking about that and you're also thinking about parks, it's like, okay, where these events are going to take place. You still also need to provide the infrastructure for the events and how many people are going to come. I mean, for example, the city of Mandora is very historic, beautiful town. They have a lot of events. It's really hard to get it in there. So even though we still, has to ensure they're safe and the adequate infrastructure for that, parks mainly, like I mentioned before, and they want to see safe and affordable neighborhoods. So the phone. This is like actually the first question over there. So I'm asking, even though we're going to have other things to rank, I think the next question for the people of the public is to rank. And in the poll, I believe that I added a few other items for you to rank. So if you go there in the next question, if you're on your phone, you can drag and drop your answers. So what do you want to see happen first, second, and third? Which is a trick question because technically you should be working on all of this at once, but that it also helps us when we're doing our CAP and your budget, because we know that we don't have unlimited funds. So that can help you every year to run that exercise with the community. Any questions, comments?
Yes. So one of the things that I didn't hear you talk about here, but that's on the survey, which alley infrastructure. So in the CRA, there are streets that have alleyways that could be utilized for densifying some of the older homesteads. So for example, in my neighborhood, the average lot size is 145 feet deep and about 120 wide or whatever. That's like 4 lots or 3 lots. 2 lots is kind of typical, but there's an opportunity there to build an accessory structure on the back, and then there could be parking and things like that. So that's been successfully done, some of the older parts. But even as you move east, and I would like to see the CRA to be expanded to 20th Street, there are homesteads there that could, if we really have to get another 2,000 people inside the CRA, we have some building to do, and really a lot of infill lots.
Yeah.
Development
So,
of infill lots and
yes.
higher densification.
So yes and yes. And
Okay.
they're both in the plan. So we'll get a slide to talk about accessory dwelling units, mix and middle, and different housing typologies. Okay, and also as part of our market assessment that we did a little inventory of the percentage of residential type of units that you have in the CRA, and we're going to see that pie chart to talk about that. For you to allow accessory dwelling units and only other residence unit typologies, you don't need to be them in the CRA. You can talk to Todd, and you can also do a citywide. So the city of Orlando, for example, in every single family residential lot, which is R1, now you're allowed to do an ADU by right, anywhere that you are. Because then, of course, then the next one for residential in other cities is R2, that which technically can build 2 units, R3, etc. So that is something that you can still do citywide, regardless if you can also provide the infrastructure. Just think about that. So in the city of Orlando, they limit the size of ADUs. I don't know how they did their calculation about stormwater and runoff, and we're limited by 500 square feet. And it goes by the size of the lot. So I purchase a house, I can only do a 500, but actually my ADU used to be 1100. So guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna pay my impact fees. And that is gonna go, oh shoot, we're gonna get to that point too. And I prefer to do that, even if they sound high, even if I have to make $3,000 in impact fee, I will pay that to get the double of development in my lot. So we'll talk about impact fees later on. All right, so we're gonna get on the bulk of the presentation, which is the master plan itself. So I spend a lot of time, besides reading all your plans, reading the existing plan, is thinking about how we can organize this CRA plan that it's digestible for everyone, that is flexible, since we're talking about stormwater, is resilience. So the way that you see this and it's color coded, we can read this plans 2 ways. We can read the plan from the top 1, 2, 3, 4, and those where I'm calling your forward move and where your goals are held on top. And then to be able to achieve economic development, you're going to go down and do that to-do list going down. But you also, if we also classify this, divided this across. So we divided this, there's projects that we have to do, like your actual physical projects. So if we're talking about sidewalks and alleys, that's a project. If we're talking about Zephyr Park, that's a project. So anything physical. And everything else beyond that is actions that you need to take almost to be ready for redevelopment. So you have to do development planning and preparation when you think about development. So that's when maybe you need to purchase some land. Maybe you need to talk about parking strategies. And then there are policies and plans that you need to create. You might have to create, an additional plan to achieve one of the goals. So for example, if we're talking about stormwater or climate adaptation, you might go ahead and start to spend a time to have a better understanding of that situation. that can be formed by the CRA. And then policies, because in regulation, because development is guided by policy. So they go hand in hand. And on the bottom is, what basically also CRAs are known for are your incentive and programs, any new programs. So if we're talking about art, the art program is there. So the way that you can do this, since you have to create a work plan every year, you don't have to do all this. So you can pick and choose. So look at this as a menu. I'm going to do a lot of food analogy. So this is your menu, your items for the next 10 years. You can do a la carte and do 3 things in 1 year because that's your capacity, that's your budget. Or, and you're eating 2 tapas, or you feel very frugal and we're going to have Thanksgiving fest and we can pick more items over here and do it. Okay? So the next slide is I'm literally going to go over each one of them. So it's going to be a little bit of a long ride. So every plan, we start with a vision statement. I'm not going to kind of read it all. It's pretty long. But it talks about safety, inclusivity, heritage is something that come up, public spaces, housing and the diversity of housing, and business owners. So it's like, how do we make all this place livable and welcoming for everyone? And one of the things that I say when you talk about redevelopment, but also placemaking, you need to make your place welcome from your residents first. Okay, don't make the mistake of the city of Orlando. We make our place for visitors. Every city has to make their place better for your residents, and the visitors will come. So that's one of them. So is our vision, then we have some overall guiding principles that, that can stay for the next 10 years and beyond. And it's about prosperity. So how do we foster and drive a local economy? It's about heritage, preserve our historic character. Diversity, we want to make sure that the diversity in this is in terms of investment and have a balanced investment. You want to make sure that you do that, having equitable opportunities for, different people from different socioeconomic backgrounds. It is resilience. I didn't have the word resilience over there. We added after Milton and Helene. So we need to make sure that we are preparing for climate adaptation. And preparing is also embrace it will be another word, and we'll talk about that later on the resilience chapter. And placemaking, we want to make sure that we're building quality of spaces that have, a unique identity. So big move. This is something that besides we have a very long list of projects, a very long list of things, if we're talking about zooming up, our big ideas for the CRA. And like I say, some of this might take you more than 10 years, but we have to put some of those big ideas in paper so we can start working on it and start planning on it. And once something is in paper, it's kind of easier for you guys to react to or change to it. That was my 30-minute, and I did not have a bark. Stop. Okay. Also, what you see in here when we technically do sometimes a master plan in this case, because I also have to review your design standards and your zoning and code regulations. What I tend to do is I tend to draw a master plan to test your development capacity, because the only way that you can try to give some advice about changing zoning regulations or talk about ADUs is really test the capacity of your blocks. And how much you can fit there with all the stuff that we can put it there. So that's what you see over there. So it's like a representation. So one of them is, if you go number 1, is we want to be able to transform, and this is the bigger vision, transform Galt Boulevard into a mixed and livable corridor. And when I talk about Galt Boulevard, it's not the road itself. The place is not made by the roads and the buildings. The place are made by the road and the building next door. And when you see a corridor, also your corridor is not the lots next to that corridor. It has to go a little bit inside. So you're creating a little bit of places. So the same for Fifth is the same. We like to see Fifth as a one big main street, and that's why we are proposing to kind of expand probably Main Street to the east, all the way to 16th Street and beyond. But even if you're west, I believe one of the plans they were proposing redesign Fifth Avenue as a Rambla style, if you remember. If not, I also have a slide for that. And the same for that, when we're talking about corridor places, it's not Fifth Avenue and the buildings right next to it. It's also, you have to look at the transition a block beyond and the transition to your neighborhood. So those are the two bigger ones. Then we also thinking about the corridors. We want to make, when we talk about gateways, I'm not talking about one vertical element to place in one corner by himself. The whole place needs to be, the gateway is made out of the buildings. Once again, buildings and roads. So if you're coming out south and you see Shepherd Park and one of your parks plans say that you have to rehab that, you can make that park as your gateway, but you also need the buildings. So you have a sense of arrival, because one little sign and one little banner will not do it. We can start with the sign on day one, but eventually you need to feel that you're arriving to a place. So the same on the west side, when you are in Zephyr Park, you're coming in, you're going all those development, you're going on top of the bridge. There's a little bit of wedge over there. We can make it feel that's like maybe that's your more natural edge, and it can be a little bit of extension of the park. And maybe you can do a little bit of effort so you can actually see the park or the water. In the center here is the same. I don't necessarily see the gateway in the center to be the intersection of Fifth and Gall. I actually see it a little bit moving in where your complex is, because you already start doing a little bit of placemaking over here. So also don't think about a gateway as an intersection. It's a space. In the east on Main Street, and also have a slide for that. The ones in the north get a little more tricky because of the land pattern. Those one might have to be just a vertical sign and a little bit of landscape. So you go ahead, sir.
I have a question, well, a comment, I guess. I like to make the Zephyr Creek a stormwater park and restore that creek. How do we access that, and whose is it? Whose property?
This is not a revise.
There it goes. I'm sorry. Sorry, Ricardo. So the issue in the Stormwater Creek is it is bigger. We want the CRA to support that idea, but right now it is the county has gotten the money for it, and they are leading that charge. The city is certainly supporting them as well, but in all of that, most of that is county.
Yeah.
But for us to provide any type of support or involvement, we have to have it in the plan.
Yeah, so we incorporated that after Hilton and Helene came. Water doesn't know city, CRA, or any type of boundaries. And later on in the presentation, I do have a little bit of a slide how we know the water is coming down to the city in some other basins. So
let me just say one other thing. We know that Zephyr Creek or Zephyr Park and the water inside of the park conveys the water onto Hillsborough River. And so the park is a vital part of that whole plan. So that's why we want to make sure that we support the county, we support the state. Whoever wants to come in and help us with that, we'll certainly say yes to, but it's bigger than just the CRA.
Yeah. And we'll show some ideas and some examples of other places have done. But the whole conversation about water, stormwater, sometimes in this case will go beyond the CRA.
Right.
And also will go beyond the city limits as well.
Right. Well, I like it. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that we're looking at it and gonna
Yes.
try to.
And then and one thing that happens with the creek, it doesn't only happen in the city of Zephyrhills here. Creeks tend to be the back of the house for many places. So now with this whole idea about natural and conservation, they are kind of coming back. It's the same for the alleys. They're the back of the house, but the alleys can also be the front of the house. But the other big idea that we have that is within the CRA limit is we are proposing to create a greenway loop in downtown to connect key destinations. And we do have some kind of existing conditions and proposed conditions, how you can do that pretty simpler, even as part of your sidewalk process. I mean, you can do a wider sidewalk and call it that.
Which we've done. We're doing the wider sidewalks
That
in
is
the
correct.
CRA. Yeah.
The CRA requirement is a 6-foot sidewalk.
Yes. Yeah, because your sidewalks are not adequate right now.
I'd also like to see at these, these gateway, the gateway places look beautiful. And I mean, again, I would like to see maybe a water feature at each of those locations, because they, it's almost like creating nodes, and they're connected, and then it comes back to Zephyr Park, and that's, where the water begins, sort of in concept.
Yeah, I mean, another point that I forgot to say, this is going to happen throughout the plan. There are very few renderings. This is, like I say, big ideas. Whenever we decide to say, like, one project is we're going to design our south gateway, and that's where you're going to get into all those details. For now, we're like basically showing inspirational photos of what we think it can happen, which it can be, one with a water feature. So like this one. So Gulf Boulevard, if we're thinking about Gulf Boulevard to be, a mix
I don't like that.
corridor that is livable. I believe that I took the strict section, like I mentioned, 309 is going to get redesigned at some point. As one of the options is to be redesigned as a 2-lane road with parking on both sides. So thinking about then how we can help bring the buildings in, because the place, and it's not the street by itself. By getting your road diet by itself is not going to make the place. You slowly have to make sure that with redevelopment will bring in buildings closer. Also, but you have to make sure they're not too close. If we're thinking about maybe the possibility of putting some residential in front of the street, then residential needs to be a little bit back, and maybe having that, what you say, race walk. Go ahead.
And this is where the truest sites were kind of envisioned is, but I know that the 301 is going to be two-way northbound there. So, I mean, you could still have parking on either side, but it is going to be.
Oh, the renders I was going on, there was still a 2-way. Did they change it? Is it 1-way?
One way.
Long-term vision is to build a bypass loop around the city, and if we get enough trips off of that, then to transform, do the design, even the one-way pair interim, so they can go back to bi-directional streets. So that is the long-term vision.
Okay, but it's still, in terms of pavement allocation.
Todd, that is a long term vision, because we've been waiting 30 years for the one-way, so we'll never see it. So.
Well, and the idea of bringing the buildings closer to the street, as long as we have parking in the back, that solves that problem.
Yes, and we'll also have a slide for that. And when we're working with your design standards and your building standards and all that, this is where this is going to go in place. So this is a representation often about.
And the form-based code already does all this, right? Am I right?
Yes.
So
only on Go.
Okay.
Yes.
Not on 6 then.
Not on 5th, for example.
5th, okay.
Okay. So another, when we think about gateway places. Okay. This is Main Street and 16th, at the end of Main Street. This is actually me doing something on the church side. We'll talk about church parking lots too in here and think about how we can be reutilized. There's a new trend that a lot of churches are actually allowing housing to be built in there for need of housing, and they work together because the parking is only being used once a week for probably 3 hours. And also the church also needs the revenue, to be honest. So if we're thinking about, imagine, once again, if we thinking about infill redevelopment, mixed use, maybe still your commercial on the bottom, we have residents on the top, we're thinking about gateways. So we're not, you can do the gateway first, you know, your Zephyrhills Main Street, and position that this is an area where we think the greenway loop is going to go. So you can do like treatment, like just paint where the crosswalk is to highlight it. And it's just a water sidewalk, your banners, your lighting. So it's just an idea how all the elements that we're proposing for streetscape and placemaking kind of come in place. And it's not going to happen all at once, but then you have to draw the final vision to be able to get to there. I can't. I got it. It moved. It moved. Okay. So we already talked about this. So our forward moves are 5 of them. So I have big words. Okay. Revamp. We want to revamp. We want to invest. We want to enhance, build, and leverage. Okay. The plan is organized kind of very similar to how a comp plan is organized. And I know Tommy and Todd are working in the comp plan. So it will be kind of easier for us to collaborate and for them to grab some ideas over here to get incorporated. So revamp is about our corridors and gateways places and how do we can create vibrant places for the 2 corridors. Not only the streets, we have to go a little bit into the blocks to do that. The second one is about economic development. You want to support investments in the area and make sure you're also positioning the CRA. I mean, you still have to be and compete with other places. Enhance, this is about our housing and neighborhood. We want to make sure that we're preserving some of the housing at the same time that we're expanding housing opportunities. Transportation and infrastructure, when we want to improve transportation and connectivity, but also we need to address flooding, you know, while supporting infill development. And leverage. This plan is not very heavy on parks because we're doing a parks plan, but we have to leverage your parks and open space system to enhance the community viability. So on revamp, we have 3 main goals. We already went into the majority of them on my previous slides about Gall Boulevard, about Fifth Ave, and the gateway features. So those are like the 3 main bigger ideas that want to revamp. So when we think about Gall Boulevard and Fifth, it's not just the street and the blocks, it's the area. And then some of the kind of projects I forgot to mention, when we're talking about projects, we rank the project. The projects have like kind of 3 different levels. So we have transformational projects, we have progressive and basic. And I'm not saying that you have to do all your transformational first, all of your progressive then, and all your basic. You can actually pick 1 transformational, 10 basic, and 2 progressive. You know, it's a la carte. But you should do at least 1 of each. And also, you don't have to wait to finish all your transformational projects before you start in your basic or the other way around. So we think a transformational project is the one that was highlighted in the outside Zephyr Park plan, which is transform Fifth Avenue into a Rambla space. How many of you know what Ramblas is? Okay. So Rambla is an actually place in Barcelona, Spain. And this is also a conversation that I was having. Is that a pedestrian friendly, is a pedestrian only street that is open to the cars limited. We know that we can't close Fifth Avenue over here, so it's going to have cars. But if we need to close it for a special event, when we're thinking about markets and we need to expand our capacity, we can use our streets, okay, for markets. And you have a beautiful grid, which with the help of the police, we can do a beautiful MOT plan and get some of the streets closed for your parades and everything. So
Claudia.
the streets is 1. And
Claudia, excuse me just a second. I want to remind the CRA board, when we did the Oakside Zephyr Park plan, one of the things that staff did was stand on one side of 5th or 54 at the time and try and cross that street. Nobody in the neighborhood wanted to cross that street because they felt it was dangerous. They were doing mid-block crossings and there was they didn't feel a connection to the park because it was on the other side of the street. And so the idea came about of the Rambla was to make that connection, to make people feel like they can, activate the street and also have the park spill out onto the street so that it engages the entire neighborhood. When we showed this at the time, the neighborhood loved it. They love the idea of it. They love the idea that, right now, if you do an event or a festival in Zephyrhills and you want it to be successful, it's on Fifth Avenue down by the main park. This is the idea of growing those festivals so that they meet all the neighborhoods. We can do something on both sides of the street. So that's how this started.
So it's a great idea. And then now it reminds me, I promised Gail that I was going to put a photo how you can do a step one for this. I
Right.
still own you that photo. So the same for parks. When you think about a streetscape or street redesign, you can take it also for step. A lot of people call it tactical urbanism, or a lot of people call it pilot project. So sometimes with paint and planter, you can achieve that. What is good about that is you can test things out. And because it's just paints and planter, you can probably remove that and kind of troubleshoot before you make the investment for the final improvement. So
when
I'm missing
we
that
talked
photo.
about this and I was telling Billy, and Billy and I were talking about it, his response to me was, did you see the roundabout that was created by?
So let it go.
Well, the other thing too, I think, was the confusion about the 45-degree angle parking in the middle of the street and then with the circulation on both sides. But for someone crossing the street, that feels less daunting because they're only crossing one lane at a time per
Yeah.
se. So that's why a Rambla works.
So
in
yeah,
this
and also
condition.
I'm gonna say with any illustration that you did, you see over here, they're representational. Technically, when you are doing each one of this project, you have to do kind of your proper master plan and take this to the next level to test all those things. Because right now we're such a high level that like this is an idea, but yes, it's like 45 degrees. It's like maybe it's 90, maybe there's none, there's many ways that you can do that in the treatments. But this is, I believe, good enough for a master plan process to get the idea, to show it to the public, to get a reaction until you're ready to execute the project. Once again, the gateways, we already talked about that. So it's the places. So you can start thinking about, how each one of them can start developing, and this will be transformational. Another one, progressive, is we want to make sure that we're targeting and invest in key catalyst redevelopment sites. So I just put here a screenshot of some of the areas or some of the sites that we can start thinking about it. These are not going to be the only one. So the truest side, we already talked about this, the tire plus right here. We mentioned church. There's a lot of potential to take advantage of some of those parking lots and negotiate with the church about what is going to be the next lifespan of some of those parcels. And your vacant parcels, you have some of them that are for sale. So I mean, in the plan, I'm not going to say purchase 1, 2, and 3. It's also dependent of your budget every year, but you need to keep an eye on everything in your inventory, especially vacant parcels. And basic, it's you guys created a Little by Loud project in 2020 right about this area. This is when I was talking about tactical urbanism. This is kind of low budget but big impact type of projects. That's why it's called Little by Loud. There were so great ideas over here. I don't know if every one of them still work up today. Probably need a little more refinement, but this concept is something that I recommend you to keep it on the books, keep it on the budget, and implement. On the next items or pink, we're going into what we need, development planning and preparation. Like I say, you need to identify and acquire an assembled site for future redevelopment. And if we're thinking about redevelopment and parking and stormwater. We also, and this is the reason that I drew up this kind of little cartoon, because you need to have a building, you need parking on the back, you need stormwater, and sometimes the parking might just go beyond your parcel boundary and you might have to share. So that's when we're talking about parking strategy. I'm not talking about putting a parking garage. It's like, how do you also accommodate parking for one of these blocks to be redeveloped, the same for the infrastructure. So for example, in this over here, when you talk about policies and plan, that's something that can be part of the policy. But talking about plans is we want to make sure as a policy you also incorporate low impact development practices, which is called LID. So there's so much that we can do, so we can include some of that. We already talked about expanding Main Street to 16, but one of the things that we wanted to see and provide in terms of program, in which Gail and I have been running, every time that a parcel comes available, Gail calls us and say, what can we do with the site, right? So Truist, we went out to Truist, and we actually can provide quick site planning to test the capacity, the redevelopment capacity of the site, and give it back to you. And this is something that it's a program and incentive that you can, give some of the developers, and also for yourself to help see the capacity. But when we're talking about redevelopment, and once again, parking and guidelines, we want to make sure our buildings are to the edge, stormwater is to the edge, and the parking is in the middle. That's basically the per T. Now, if we think about a citywide stormwater system, there are ways that you don't have to put stormwater in a parcel, because you build a system that you can buy into it. Okay, so which is the challenge, not only you, because this means in every block you develop, you need to put water, and it's 20%. Questions? Where I go invest?
So for example, if we wanted to build a garage over Lake Necessity, that the concept of underground vault water storage, things like that, doesn't look as successful after Milton and Helene than it did before, I think. I think we know there are areas in the older part of our downtown that need long-term solutions for water control, water retention, and really moving the water away from the downtown. So,
The water is, I'm going to say something this is before. So City of Zephyrhills is a closed basin, meaning that none of your water that is here, it doesn't go to the ocean or open water. It goes to a river, meaning you're always going to get flooded. You're meant to. The good thing, you are not in a coastal city, so you don't get surge, which is over there, the pipes go to the ocean, when the things, but you also have wave coming in. So you are going to be dealing with water. So we do have to plan with water. We have to kind of manage and mitigate to reduce the impact that it's having in your infrastructure in your homes. But that's part of the whole component. Garage. I personally don't think that the city needs a garage, neither right now or in 15 years. You're not there yet. You may be, but not for the next 10-year cycle, even for our projection of how much commercial and office. First of all, they're also like $1 million or $2 million per deck.
I think,
Yeah.
But what we're hearing though is when people come downtown for a festival, there's nowhere to park.
Yeah,
really,
and we're going to
it's
promote
in-
walkability and bike and micromobility. There's other things
I
that
understand that.
we can do. You can probably negotiate like they do in Mandora. There's a pop-up business, and vacant lots become temporary parking lots that you do it for 4 times, 6 times a year. Also, when we're thinking about events, if we're thinking about expanding some of the capacity of the spaces, we can look at that too. But I will not recommend to build a garage for 4 events a year.
The event parking isn't really the problem. The business parking
Yeah.
is more the problem.
It is the problem because all your little parcels, I mean, this one on the truest, even though it's subdivided by 4 different parcels, technically it's owned by one person. So that person can actually build those 40 spaces around there. The challenge is when you redevelop one little skinny site at a time, you can only put 2 or 3 parking spaces. So when we're thinking about parking strategy, it needs to be about the whole block and eventually building out that parking capacity in your blocks. Every one of your blocks has capacity for parking. Okay, because all your blocks are this, every block west of Gull are the same as this one. It's copy and paste.
I ask you, we need to kind of wrap things up a
Yes,
little.
so I'm gonna try to move forward. So some of the goals are, identifying fund for art projects and enhancement. And something that we brought up is to create a distinct brand for some of our spaces. But here's kind of the hot topic for the day is one of the assignments that we had. It was like to review our design standard for the CRA, to review your code and your future land use. And one of the recommendation is to actually develop a combined zoning and design standards, one package for the whole district. For example, we give an example of the city of Tampa. Downtown Tampa only have 2 zonings, which are mixed use 1 and mixed use 2. And they also have a form-based code over there. So something that it's kind of easy and legible for everyone. Right now, we do have 10 different zoning categories, Euclidean and 3 form-based code within the CRA, and we have 4 future land use categories and 1 overlaid. And sometimes it's kind of even recommended that you only have 1 future land use category. And if what we decide form-based code is something that we like, what we did is we review the form-based code in some of the elements and how it is organized, how do our design guidelines and organize. And for this project, what we did is we came up with a proposed regulating plan and code organization. Okay, so talking about the food, what we did is I organized your pantry and put and organize all your cans or your pasta or your meat and everything. It's all this, put it in here, and then actually got rid of the excess that you have on regulation and try to do a much cleaner framework code that is easy to understand, that you start with the area and then what are my lot standards, what are my building standards, because that's what you need to regulate in a block in your public realm. And then you also have a regulating plan, which your form-based code actually have it, is the one in the bottom, but this will be district-wide. Another thing is we want to do is if we're thinking about arts and you're thinking about investing in art, and even started an arts fund, you do need an arts master plan. The city of Pinellas Park has a really cool one that we can look at it, and also thinking about some gateways and wayfinding. This is one that we quickly did just to put in some of renderings, and they came out so good that I'm like, I'm just gonna put it in the presentation. Nobody has approved those, by the way. Those are for the rendering that I did for you guys. Incentive and programs is the same. If we're thinking about arts program, there's few examples like utility box program is one of them. But if we're also thinking about businesses, you can do interior building renovation, especially on some of your main street. They're pretty popular mainly in the Midwest and Northeast, but also you can also invest in startup. So the one in the bottom is another of our clients, the OBT Development Board. They just kickstart this company called Block and Lock. So they make grid concrete blocks to make houses a little more affordable and faster. And she actually has a lot of money in the bank. She has a grant right now for $100,000 to start a new business in the CRA. And I'm actually considering. All right, number 3, which is enhanced. This is about our neighborhoods. This is the chapter we talk about. We want to make sure that we invest and preserve the existing housing stock first. So what we have, Then we think about creating new infill housing opportunities, ensuring that also we're preserving the character of the area, but we also want to make sure that we diversify a housing stock. To do so, we might want to extend our housing typologies, what is allowed, so we can look at the miss and middle. There's a book, there's a website, they can look at it. You don't have to use it all. We use the ones that we think are appropriate for our neighborhood. And the chart in the bottom is that donut chart that I said. This is our housing composition for the CRA, which is 70% single family, 20%, 26 multifamily, and we have nothing miss in middle. But we do have a few ADUs which are allowed. Another one is creating a neighborhood identification is something that was brought up. So here an example of a bunch of a couple one from Orlando, and the one at the top is actually from my neighborhood. That's the picture of my little house with the Lake Como flag. So also kind of gives you a sense of pride in where you are in there. And we talk about development planning and preparation. So already identifying site for redevelopment. But once you own the site, what do you do with the site? So there's plenty of examples what other CRAs are done with the CRA land for, housing. And this one is a combination of housing for artists specifically, because that's what Lake Worth wanted to do. And we did talk about church. Sorry, I found one that might not be applicable to here, but that's a church in DC in the middle, and they just did an infill housing. So there's opportunities to look at, other cases. For policies and plans for housing, a new trend is to create turnkey set of floor plans and documents already approved by your building department. This is one that Orange County did. We don't know how successful it's going to be, but we can keep track of those and then make people know about it. Actually, ADUs are approved in here, so maybe what we need is a little more promotional materials in there. Incentive is, we did hear about safety, of course, is always a hot topic everywhere. So think about a neighborhood watch and crime prevention, but it also brings a long way if you invest in your housing stock, and what are some of the house repair programs that we can have. Bill, this is transportation infrastructure. We're getting into the flooding issue. I added, of course, we need to build on the traditional grid and improve our connectivity and promote multimodal transportation, so walking, biking, two of them. We need to improve our streets, alleys, sidewalks, and the utility to support this connectivity. And we need to invest in the area's overall infrastructure to ensure adaptability on extreme weather events. And not only extreme weather events, I guess sometimes here when it rains 3 inches or 4 inches, you also get a lot of flooding. So you're seeing that more often. So like I said, one of the bigger ideas that we have is to create that greenway loop, and also think about other streets on the CRA that we can formalize some bike accessibility. You don't necessarily have to have a lane. You have very low volumes in your neighborhood streets and some key intersections that take to our schools, our sidewalks, our alleys. So this is about all that infrastructure. And like I say, we will keep an eye also. I mean, the CRA doesn't necessarily have to be leading the way in a lot of this. They can in some of the projects, but they do have to work along planning and all the departments in some bigger redesigns and projects and public works. So here's some an alley idea that was part of the outside park that is still pretty valid when we're thinking about alleys or the back of the houses. They can also, the back of the house, they can be the front of the house and increase your parcel capacity. St. Pete has plenty of examples for this. So if you're ever in St. Pete, drive their alleys. Those are the best case studies. Lake necessity, we all talk about it. Everyone has an idea what to do. I think you can start pretty simple with art and paint. I don't know where the art and paint is going to have to go, but something simple. It needs to stay. We need the capacity and your sidewalks, of course, and streetscape and stormwater. A lot of cities create kits for green infrastructure. So any piece of land that we can increase our stormwater capacity, you need to think about that. In rain gardens, you can also do it in private property. A lot of neighborhood has that they do a kit, how do you do a biosolar rain garden in your front yard. So this is a little more how do the development and policies and plans and programs you need to incentivize to make your city storm-proof, I guess, storm-proof in a little way. And there's plenty of examples, and some of them you already have some stormwater basins, but we know it's not enough. So we need to add a little more to that. Leverage, this is the last one, parks. We did talk about the big idea, which is the creek. We know that we need the water management district, we need the county, we need the city, and sit down on the table and think about how water runs and continue to leverage and do the really good job that you're doing with your parks. Instead of like I say, transformational projects, a good example is McCoy Creek in the city of Jacksonville is in planning phases, but that was kind of the back of the house for the city. They're bringing that one and restoring to increase the stormwater capacity. So in here in the slide on the top, it's a zoom out of Zephyrhills a little bit, and we know that the water is coming from the north, from that basin, going down to the creek, going through Zephyr Park, and actually goes down kind of almost parallel to Gal Boulevard. So water is coming through the north because there's a bigger system in there, and that's how everything is moving. But so think about that. So the creek, it's one element of that system. Another couple items that we talk about, of course, redesigning Shepherd's Park. But another kind of hidden gem that you guys have is that little square over here on Main Street. I call it Main Street Square. I know you guys use a different name, but I think with a few changes to that, we can utilize it and make it into a usable space. Right now, it looks like there's a bunch of stuff in there. So maybe we can kind of clean it out so the space can be a little more flexible, similar to the picture that you see here. And I believe this is my last slide. Some of the plans and policy, of course, continue the support of the parks assessment and master plan. You talk about probably the creation of the park and recreation department. Also in parks, I don't know if Kristen mentioned, you can also do a wayfinding system, and each one of them can have their own identity, and incentive and improvements, to fund your parks and do state and federal grants. And this is pretty much Kristen's court. So with that, I conclude, and I forgot to key you guys on the Mentimeter, but we can probably put it up. I know I went pretty fast at the end.
I knew restaurants were going to be number one.
So if you have not gone, so a lot of I threw a lot of things in there. So there's a lot of big ideas in there, and sort of like smaller scale idea, like let's do a sidewalk and an alley, and kind of that is the intent of the plan. Every time that you do planning, you have to do macro and micro, and you have to be able to think about both scales at the same time, which is something is sometimes is difficult for someone. So, and then you also have to like try to draw everything how you want the end point to be and walk your way back. So the intent of the plan is to be able to do that so you can get that flexibility.
All right. And I do want to say to the board, thank you so much. I know it's been a long evening. We will provide you with all of the material from tonight. I know we went through it quickly, and so that you can review it. And if you have any questions, you can let me know. Okay.
And I think you did a great job. Don't get me wrong. I pulled out a 2011 plan and it's about the same thing. The 2016 plan is the same thing. An overview is great, but we've got to focus on one area and try and get that done, and just take these little things in tiny bites. Because if you look at this thing macro, it's overwhelming.
It is
And it's $1 billion too.
Yeah.
So we've got to
So
pick the little pieces that we can start with and have the plan. And when we're sitting through the park, we need a park director. You don't need to be worried about parks. You've got your hands full with the rest of the stuff. That's my opinion.
And
So
really, like we talked about, the missing middle. There are 5, I can sit here and list 5 ways that we can improve the density and the quality of affordability of housing in the CRA district tomorrow. But we just have to act. We have to do something about it. We have to build, we have to build a campaign to attract developers and people who want to do that. And we have to incentivize them. And then we have to show that we've been successful at that. Then we move to the next thing.
And absolutely, everything that you said is absolutely true. The issue is that we, by law, by statute, we have to do this. And to spend money on it, it has to be identified in the plan. And as you know, from the legislature right now, CRAs are under fire. And so we're trying, and they've added additional layers of reporting to the CRA. And so having the updated plan so that I can do goals and objectives every year, the plan is written for it to be that way. And on the parks for the CRA and the city are a partnership, because the CRA paid for the design of Hercules and the city paid for the building it. And then Shane's department is now managing it. So it is a team effort from the city. So.
and I'm not saying you shouldn't have input in it, but I'm just saying if you
There's
look,
enough.
there's
there's a lot. It's a lot.
ton of stuff.
So the next are, if you had time in your cell phone to go over, it was the next and the poll is about ranking. So I say, which of the former will should the CRA focus first? So if you can, the ones that did it and grab in your phone, you can pull, and then with that input, that will help us,
right,
Gail and I to sit down, and out of that entire menu, then we can mark what we're going to do first, second, and third with a TIF projection. That's technically kind of the next steps. How much funds we're going to have in 2042, we'll walk our way back and do that. Tom, you were going to say
And then once we have those, remember, you will have the final say on the priority list.
The only reason I'm up here is I took over downtown development in 1979, and getting to Commissioner Smith's point, everybody said nobody's going to invest in downtown Orlando. Nobody. They were going to go to Disney and so forth and so on. So, but we didn't have a plan. We now have a plan, or they had it. Now we did 3 plans subsequent to that every 10 years, every 7 years or so. I will say, I will invite any of you to Orlando, and I'll personally take you a tour of different things. Soto, which is south downtown. It's not even downtown. It's around the hospital. And it was a gold boulevard. It's Orange Avenue. What has changed? It took 12, 15, 20 years to do that. Now the DOT has come in and made it a complete street. This was FDOT that didn't want to do anything. So sometimes it's just, in the Bible, perseverance is what makes things happen. And that's all I'm saying, is that this is a good roadmap. Personally, if I had to want, Zephyr Park is your number 1 project. Zephyr Park is your number 1 project. It's got to be, it's there. It's got the heritage. It's already got built-in, legacy. It's just like our Lake Eola, and I was telling a couple of commissioners before, when I came to Orlando in 72, I stayed at the hotel, was the Robert Meyer, some of you old enough, and the desk clerk said, don't go outside at night, because there was drug dealing, prostitutions, and so forth. Took that over basically in 85. Mayor Frederick came in and said, we're taking the park back, $5 million, and it was mostly CRA money. That was $5 million back then. I don't know what it would be now, But there've been a couple of other iterations, and now the city's looking at a $60 million improvement to that park that is already a success. So again, it's an economic development issue, not just an amenity issue. So again, if I had a vote, it would be Zephyr Park, Zephyr Park, Zephyr Park.
We're on that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we're
anyway,
on that page with
again,
you.
thank you for indulging me.
Thank you. And residents of that area.
Okay. I don't think that have changed much. Right.
We'll
So
use this. And
yeah, so if you have time, yes, submit your vote and that will be kind of good. And like I say, every year you'll have the time to reassess each one of them and make it chewable and digestible. At the end, it's a menu, right?
Yep.
All right, great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Ready?
We do have a handout that got locked up.
I'll send all of that to you.
Okay.
All right.
Adjourn. Good night.
That's-